Welcome back to Sports Betting Truth, and today we're going to talk about golf and what I personally would do if I was going to build a golf model. Now, this video isn't going to be about teaching you how to build a golf model. I'm not going to do that because I wouldn't do that unless I've already built one, and I've never built a golf model before. So I wouldn't want to teach you how to build a golf model, not actually having done it myself before. So this is going to be more of like a brainstorming video where I give you my ideas and approaches that I personally would probably look at taking if I were to build a golf model. And why golf? Well, it's because it's a sport that's going on right now and all the big four are still not playing. No baseball, no basketball, no nothing. And really, if you want to bet on anything right now in America, it's really golf or NASCAR. So here's what I would do personally if I was going to build a golf model. So right now I have the PGA Tour website pulled up, the stats page. And so what I would do personally is I would go down and find stats that matter. So a lot of good stats, for example, are what they call the strokes gained stats. These are great stats. So you have strokes gains tee to green, which is pretty much an average of strokes gains off the tee, approaching the green and around the green. So let me show you that. And so this is season to date 2020. And the average strokes gained in these three measures, and then an average right here. So off the tee is pretty much the tee shot. Approaching the green is usually the shots off the fairway. Around the green are, your chips and your short game. And there's also strokes gained for putting too, but this is just off the tee to green strokes gained. And I think this is a good stat to start with, a good universal stat that you could use. You could even break it out by these three. So what I probably would do is I would scrape these stats season to date for probably the past 3 or 4 years and come up with a weighted average for every player. And I don't think scraping this page will be very hard because if you look at the links right here, it looks like every player has an ID. So for Tyrell Hatton, his ID is 34363. And so you'd be able to use that ID for database purposes, which is very helpful instead of having to use their name. So what I would do is I'd probably go through and find stats like shots gained, as well as putting strokes gained, those types of stats. Also, there's some good scoring stats out there. There's a ton of stats on this website. It's very overwhelming. But you just want to find, some good all-around stats to use to measure. So, for example, we got par 3 efficiency, par 4 efficiency. Those look like good stats to me. Scramble stats, which should be around here somewhere. I think scramble is a good stat. So you're just looking for worthwhile stats to measure. Here we got 2 more. Total distance efficiency and driving efficiency. There's so many stats for golf. It's crazy. So really what you would do is you would build a database of stats for every player going back 3 or 4 years, build a weighted average, and be able to use that as your reference. And there's also this stat right here, which is a PGA Tour guide, which is pretty much the same thing. But these stats, if you don't know how to build a scraper in Python or R or whatever, and you just want to copy and paste, this looks very well defined in terms of being easy to copy and paste into Excel and everything. So this right here is the shots gained tee to green stat, just like what I showed you off the PGA website, but in a more copy and paste friendly table. So these are the 2 websites I personally would source when it comes to PGA golf stats. And so then what I do, once I gather all these stats, like a good stat database with, maybe a dozen stats that I can measure that I pick, I would then go to the leaderboard section. And this tournament hasn't started yet. Let me go to past results. So this is the RBC Heritage Tournament, which is going on right now, or starts tomorrow. And we can see the 2019 leaderboard, right? So what we would do is we'd build a leaderboard database of these past tournament results. And within these leaderboards, we'd have their player IDs and everything, so we could merge. For example, this is the 2019 RBC Heritage leaderboard. We would merge each player's 2019 stats that we selected in our database earlier. We would join that to the leaderboard table and then find out which of those stats mattered the most when it came to their position on the leaderboard. So this is just a total example, based on absolutely nothing. But let's say Cheng Sung Pan was the winner last year, and let's say his best stats were shots gained approaching the green, right? And we would run a regression based off of shots gained approaching the green versus the leaderboard position of this tournament. and we would determine which p-values were the lowest and determine which stat was most influential, or which stats were most influential on the leaderboard and where the player positioned on the leaderboard. Because here's the thing with golf, every course is different, and some stats might matter more than other stats based on the course. For example, the tournament that was played last week at Colonial in my hometown of Fort Worth, only a mile from TCU, I know that course has a reputation for being very tactical. You can't just go out there and blast the ball off the tee and win it just by being able to drive the ball a long distance, because that's not what the course is about. It has a lot of twists and turns, and it's more about short game and being tactical rather than just blasting the ball off the tee. So at a course like Colonial, driving distance and stuff like that might not matter as much as, approaching the green shots in your short game and your putting. So every course is different, and every course is going to have stats that matter more than others. So if a course, for example, has a lot of par 3s, you might want to look at par 3 efficiency. If a course has a lot of par 5s, you might want to look at par 5 efficiency. So every course has different stats that matter. So what you're really trying to do, at least in a golf model I would build, is determine which stats matter on every course, which stats influence the leaderboard. Season stats. I would use 2019 to compare the 2019 leaderboards, for example. And I would go back, I'd probably build a leaderboard database going back, a few years as well. That way, you can iron out all the details and see which stats over time are most influential on the leaderboard. And so whenever you would use your model going forward, so for example, for this upcoming RBC Heritage tournament, you'd go back and look at the past RBC Heritage leaderboards joined in with the players' stats for that year and determine which stat was most influential on the winner. Or if you're using the head-to-head bets for golf, which stats were more influential for ranking higher on the leaderboard than the lower on the leaderboard, right? Golf is tough because, it's mainly a bunch of long shots that you're betting on, and a lot of players come out of nowhere to win these things. But like I said, it's all about value bets, and it's all about the long run. So you're just trying to determine which player is undervalued or overvalued based on what their odds are or how they face off against their head-to-head matchups being offered. All right, so here's the current lines for the RBC Heritage for golf, right? Rory McIlroy is plus 1,200. That's your best bet. Then you got plus 1,250 for Bryson DeChambeau and Justin Thomas plus 1,390. But then the rest of the bets are head-to-head. Most of these bets are head-to-head, so a model in my vision would be more for the head-to-head version, because you would find which stats matter, right? And then whichever player is better in those stats in these head-to-head is who you'd bet on. The futures are kind of hard because it's kind of hard to determine a percentage chance of winning based off of which stats matter more. So really it's all about the head-to-heads. So here's more RBC Heritage futures. I mean, these are all long shots, and you probably could build a model to determine if any of these are undervalued or overvalued, because once you start getting to the bottom here, you're talking about like 1% chances and stuff. And then you also have these prop bets like top 5, top 10 finish, top 20 finish, first round leader, and all that stuff, right? And then you also have these 3-ball props that are like who's going to be ahead at the end of the first round out of these 3 players. I mean, these are all things you can bet on, but really what I would look at is the head-to-head, because you can measure 2 golfers' stats head-to-head and determine which one is better. And most of these head-to-head bets are, 50-50 propositions, right? So, I mean, look at the minus 140 is the biggest one I've seen. So, okay, we have a minus 170. So, really, they're not really lopsided head-to-heads. So, you can compare the stats head-to-head and determine which stats matter, and therefore that's how you make your head-to-head bet. There's a lot of different stats in the PGA, and there's a lot of different ways you can bet the PGA. So whatever model I would create would be focused on one bet type, really. And for me, I'd probably build it off of head-to-head bets and forget about the futures and the who's going to win and top 5 finishes. I'd probably push that to the side because that's a lot harder to measure. But overall, to wrap it up, in conclusion, what I would do is I'd build a database of each player's stats going back, 3 or 4 years, calculate a weighted average based on the stats I selected, probably somewhere around the shots gained stats and efficiency stats and scramble stats and stuff like that. And then I would create a database of leaderboards of various tournaments over the past 3 or 4 years. And then I would merge it with the player stats for that year who participated in that tournament, and then determine which stats influence the leaderboard the most in each tournament. That way you can factor in for the unique attributes of every course, as different stats are going to matter for different courses. And from there, I would use which stats matter the most, and then find these head-to-head matchups, compare the two players in the model based on the stats that matter, and whichever one has the better stats and the stats that matter, I would place a bet on. That's how I'd do it. Just a brainstorming session, I'm not going to show you how to build it out. That would take forever, and if you followed me on Twitter lately, you'll see I'm in the middle of building a baseball model right now, and I've spent already about a month of development on it already, and I might be halfway through. So building these models out takes a while. So you're going to have to invest a lot of time and effort into doing something like this. But if I were going to build a golf model, this is how I would do it. But I also want to strongly recommend to only focus on a few models at a time. I think it's better to be an expert in like 2 or 3 sports than be so spread thin across many sports with many different models. That also falls into gambling addiction territory. For me, I only like to focus on one sport per season. For me, it's college football in the fall, college basketball in the winter, and then spring and summer is baseball. That's 3 sports a year for me, 3 models I have to maintain. And it's not just building a model that takes a long time, it's also maintaining it in the day-to-day operations of the model. I mean, even with my college basketball model that was fully automated, I still had about 30 minutes of maintenance a day that I had to do with it that can't be automated. Like, you still have to go into the website, your betting website, and you still have to go and make the bets. That can't really be automated. That takes a while. So even with an automated model, it's still, the day-to-day operations still take a while. So I think it's best that you only focus on one sport at a time, maybe 2 if they overlap. There's still some overlap in college basketball and college football in November. There's still some overlap with baseball and college football in September, but really that's the exception and not the rule. It's best to focus just on one sport at a time. So if you want to make golf the sport that you focus on, in the summer or in the spring, go ahead. Just don't wear yourself thin. Do not stretch yourself thin. Be careful. Anyway, that wraps it up today for my brainstorming session on building a golf model. Stay tuned right here to Sports Betting Truth for more videos like this. Subscribe if you want to. I got a lot of good content on the analytical side when it comes to sports betting. Instead of just giving you just straight picks like most sports betting YouTube channels do, I actually go into the details. So, Sports Betting Truth signing off.